one session last week.
We had a session last week, and we studied chapter 41, which is actually the beginning of everything that we've studied in the Tanya until now is coming together now. So, Okay, so as I was saying, chapter 41 is where everything that we've been learning in the Tanya is coming together. Okay, so it's like 10 chapters of conclusion, bringing, tying up all the different components of our study. So if I may actually highlight some of those components. In the beginning of the first chapter of the Tanya, we set out our goal. Actually, the title page of the Tanya, how is this near to us to serve God? In the first 10 chapters or so, it was about a spiritual anatomy, where we were trying to figure out how we work, because how can we understand how our human endeavor, goal, if we don't understand how we are spiritually? How can we have a spiritual practice if we don't understand how we spiritually work? So we go and we talk about how we have the 10 emotional faculties, and we talked about garments of the soul and how we express these emotional parts of our personality, express themselves through thought, speech, and action, and then we come back to our goal, which is to become a Bainani, which is how a Bainani is using and channeling their garments of thought, speech, and action, always to be expressing their spiritual soul, which we have 2 of also, that was part of the spiritual anatomy, to reflect the spiritual godly mission that Jewish people were given in this world. And so we talk about what does that mean to be a Bainani. So we talk about how a Bainani means to be always constantly actively working. A Bainani also means to be constantly actively fulfilling their actions, to be, aligning their actions to be the mitzvot and to be reflecting what God wants, but not the emotions as much. The Bainani isn't expected to have perfect ecstasy, emotion, passion towards God the way a tzaddik is. Yet, in order to have a sustainable relationship with God, we are going to want to develop some emotion. We are going to want to go on the kind of look towards the tzaddik's path, even though we recognize that we're not going to make perfection in that area. And it's kind of like in a relationship where do we want our somebody we love to always just be doing things we want because they just want to check off that box? Or do we want them to also, maybe they're a different person, maybe they weren't wired the same way we are. We're definitely not wired the way God is, right? Maybe we're wired completely differently, but we do want them to try and understand how we tick and understand it and make sense of it and feel some of that. Because otherwise it feels super dry, and it's actually not even sustainable, because you're constantly trying to just suppress without any real, emotion and feeling and affinity towards what you're doing. So that's what we do. Even though we know we're not going to ever have perfect feelings, we still develop those feelings. And we have the long way and the short way of developing those feelings. And the long way was with meditation, and the short way is with inspiration. But we also talked about how the advantage of the long way is that we are empowered. We're not dependent on constant inspiration to fuel our inner truth. Because actually this chapter 42 is going to touch on the fact that even if it's our inner truth, we're living in an environment where that inner truth isn't compatible. So it's like it just constantly needs to be reawakened. Whereas if we are like working our spiritual muscles, we actually can develop some skill and some, and go get somewhere. Work on ourselves to the point where we get this far and then we get that far, but it is a constant work. So, we did take some chapters to talk about some troubleshooting, like sadness, shame, like what happens when this comes up, what happens when that comes up. But now we're coming home. We're coming back to the long way, how we're coming back to meditation, which is the long way. And we're using all that information and understanding that we learned to really try and flesh out what it looks like to meditate on love and fear of God in order to generate those actions. Does that sum things up for you? Any questions before we actually get into chapter 42? And so actually chapter 41 is also important to review because chapter 41 introduces the fact that fear comes first. And fear doesn't sound exciting. Fear versus love, right? We talked about the two sides of the angel that flies our actions up, makes them mobile, right? Because there's that like unfeeling action. It's better than nothing, right? We actually took a whole chapter to talk about the. I didn't mention it, but I didn't mention it in the review. But we did learn about the cosmos of how there is a bigger scheme of just my service. Like my service is actually part of a global service, and a global goal that we have to create spiritual, godly awareness, on earth. And in that global goal, action is the main thing. Action is going to be salient. Yet, emotion makes those actions mobile. It makes it go somewhere. It makes them land. So we have two general emotions on two opposite sides. We have the love-based emotions and we have the fear-based emotions. So which one would be more exciting? This is a review for last week, so I'll just say it. Love. But fear is actually foundational. And if we use the word fear, it's hard to relate to that. But if we use the word respect, then it helps understand. Because respect is really step one of the fear-sided emotion. Respect. And of course, we're talking about a relationship between us and God. So all of our relationships can be analogous to that. So in a relationship, if someone does something really, really nice for you, but there's a lack of respect in that relationship, it's actually really hard to receive that gesture. There isn't the necessary foundation of safety that needs to come first. So if somebody is crossing your boundaries, things that are closely important to you, how can you accept the cute stuff? It's not going to land. Does that make sense in your life? Yeah. Number one, respect and safety. And then we can build on that respect and safety, and then you're open to receive the love. Because love is an expansive, and we're going to go back to love. We're going to get to that. We're going to flesh out love. But as an introduction, love is an expansive emotion. Love makes us feel come toward. Our heart swells. Fear and respect keeps us in our boundaries. It keeps us making space for the other. So we just to review, we're saying that respect, as in the fear side of things, respect comes first. It's a foundation for relationships, because if you have love without respect, you can't really even receive the love. There isn't the safety that is necessary that's created by the respect. So chapter 41 was all about accepting this premise that respect comes first. And this respect, this basic, general respect is called fear of God, or Kabbalat Ol, accepting the yoke. Accepting our place in the cosmos of the world, that we were created, and this is a review of chapter 41, but we were created, the world was created for us. So it's super, super empowering, but the world was created for us to serve. And that place in the world of accepting that role, that is the foundational premise of fear of heaven. And there's this, this is like a term that's been used throughout generations of being a God-fearing Jew. What does that mean? It means accepting this premise. Number one, I accept that I am here on earth, super duper important. I've been put here with a purpose to serve God. And it's about God. And putting yourself in this greater context is this respect. It's like this containment and making space for Hashem. And once we do that, then then we're going to be able to build on that and add the love. Chapter 42 is going to continue about fear, but it's going to help us continue to understand. In chapter 41, we mentioned that there's two levels of fear. The higher level of fear, as one of somebody in the class mentioned last week, is actually starts to marry with love. That's the higher level of fear, which we will learn about in chapter 43 and 44. And then as it morphs into love, we will actually get to talk about that. But in chapter 42, first things first, we're going to learn about the lower level of fear. And it's called Yira Tata, which is right in our first line of chapter 42. In the light of what has already been said on the subject of the lower level of fear, as summarized above, in other words, chapter 41 introduced this lower level of fear. Let's talk about what that means for us and how it's experienced. So, it is most definitely foundational. In fact, the Torah in Deuteronomy says, Moses is talking, actually God is talking to the Jewish people, saying, V'ata Yisrael, and now Israel, Ma Hashem Elokecha Shoel Me'imach. What is the Lord your God requiring of you? Ki im liyira et Hashem Elokecha, but just to serve God. So the statement says, what is God even asking? Just to serve God? Like, this is basics, basically. It's a basic expectation. The Talmud asks the question. The Gemara asks, is fear then such a small thing? So it asks the hopefully obvious question that all of you are hopefully experiencing. What do you mean fear of heaven? That's a big thing. To fear God, it's like easier said than done. Like, that way to oversimplify that. Like, yes, it may be foundational, but it's not a small thing when it comes to action, when it comes to practicing that. So the Gemara asks that. It says, how can the Torah say that it's a small thing? So the answer lies first things first, the Gemara answers. And in the top line of the next page says, yes, in the case of Moses, it is a small thing. So in the context for Moses, it's a small thing. So that will be the answer to the question. But actually, it's not good enough. The Gemara continues to discuss, and Tanya is going to come back to this idea. What does it mean for Moses it's a small thing? Is God talking just to Moses? Is the Torah just for Moses? So what if it's a small thing for Moses? What about us? So now we get to discuss what Moses represents. Because for Moses being a small thing does not only necessarily mean the person Moses, it means the Moses in us. For the Moses in us, it's a small thing. What is the Moses in us? The Moses in us is, the Tanya tells us, is da'at. And this is a review for us. We learned about this in chapter 3. We have 7 emotional faculties, and we have 3 intellectual faculties. We have wisdom, chachma, bina, understanding, da'at, knowledge. And I did that with my hands because wisdom is right-sided. Understanding is left-sided, and knowledge combines. And that's actually the acronym of Chabad, chachma, bina, da'at. And the da'at is in the center because it generates emotion. it filters, it not filters, it channels that its intellect that's been generated to an actual feeling. So let's talk a little bit more about dot. You can know, so chachma is inspiration. It's like a flash of like a brainstorm. You don't know what it is. Bina is a brainstorm. Like, let's figure out, like, let's say if you're talking about a house, right? You have this like idea, like you're not sure, you're onto something, you're not sure what it is. Bina is like, okay, what is it? And you start to say, you start to sketch, and you start to design, and you start to make blueprints, and you start to decide colors, and you start to decide shapes and materials. That's the bina. Da'at is actually creating plans with that brainstorm so detailed. It's like the MEP drawings, like so ready for construction, so applicable, applicationable, actionable, right? In ourselves, when there's knowing and then there's knowing. Da'at is knowledge, knowing. There's knowing and there's knowing. There's like knowing something, yeah, sort of, kind of, and then there's I know this, you can't convince me otherwise because this is part and parcel of who I am. I know it. That's dot. You can't unthink it, you can't unknow it, nobody can take it out of you. It is part of you. That conviction, that integration of what you know with how much it affects you, with how much part of you it is. The word da'at in always referenced, one of the first times it comes up in the Torah, if the first time, is where it talks about Adam knowing Eve. Adam knowing Eve, right? Into being intimate and having a child. It uses the word da'at, that connection, that what's the word? That has consequences, that creates something. That's like the cement. Yes, the cementing knowledge, where it feels cemented in you. That's dot. So each one of us has this faculty, right? Each one of us has this aspect of ourselves that we have this ability to assimilate knowledge to this degree. That is the ability that comes from das. Where does that ability to apply that to Hashem come from? Moses. That's the Moses in me. And there's a song, I've got the Moses in me, right? Like you can, that's the Moses in me. So, there's actually, it's really interesting, there's actually, Moses called a shepherd. There's actually 7 shepherds. It's at the bottom of the same page, who cause vitality and godliness to flow to the community of the souls of Israel. For this reason, they are called shepherds. There's 7 of our forefathers and ancestors that are actually have this role, and 7 for the 7 emotional aspects. Da'at made it in there. And actually we celebrate them on Sukkot because they correspond to the Ushpizin, the guests, the mystical guests that come to the Sukkah. Each day has another one. So one of them is Abraham. Abraham is, I don't know if you can guess based on other Tanya classes, is chesed, kindness. Abraham is the shepherd of kindness in us.
So every day, that's the imagine, like there's
and we connect. We connect to that energy.
Yeah.
Yes, and we talk about it in the Sukkah. We really try. We really can put effort into connecting to the energy of that shepherd and that shepherd's energy.
Does each shepherd represent a different energy?
Yes. So the most famous one would be Abraham would be Chesed, Isaac would be Gevurah, Yaakov is Tiferet, and then there's David, and then there's Joseph, and then there's all and what they all represent. Moses is actually considered the main one, and that's why he's called the faithful shepherd. It's on the next page, Raya Mehemna, and our teacher Moses. Just hidden for me. Yeah, our teacher. Our teacher Moses, peace unto him, comprises aspects of them all. And he is called the faithful shepherd, or the shepherd of faith, depending on what you're trying to say. This means that he draws down the quality of da'at to the community of Israel, that they may know and be cognizant of God, so that for them, godliness will be self-evident and experienced by every Jew. So each one of us has this aspect inside of us that is channeled through the energy of Moses. The Tanya also says that there's actually a people throughout our history that have embodied this aspect of da'at completely, so that they can actually feed, like a shepherd, da'at collectively to the Jewish people. And these are our every generation supposedly has a Moses, a real Moses, like a real leader, an actual leader. And that leaves behind, the Alter Rebbe would be one of them. I mean, his entire work, it's not hard to imagine how he's Moses, right? He's feeding this da'at, this knowledge of God through his work that we actually can still access today, to his generation and even onwards. So we actually also have even more concrete ways to get guidance on da'at, on how and they almost like feed us and guide us. And what the Lubavitcher Rebbe did, into our generation, as in depending how young you are and how old you are, to actually be able to meet with people individually and connect to the root of their soul with personalized, sometimes advice, sometimes even just connection that inspired and brought out the da'at in that individual, and that's the role of the Moses of the generation. So we have both. We can access Moses' energy through those individuals throughout history, but also through our own innate ability from Moses.
Sorry, I have to go.
Yeah.
I have Lauren delivered to my office.
Okay.
Right
We'll
now.
miss you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck with that. So, okay. So because we have this da'at, so bringing it back, because we have this da'at in us and in people and throughout the generations, we can access that level of fear. We can access the lower level of fear. We haven't even talked about what the lower level of fear is. So let's go ahead and do that. So, the lower level of fear is the ability to zone in and connect with our das, with our knowledge, and make relevant the fact that God is our King. And that how do I put this into words? And that we're reflecting on the same meditation of last week, and that God is everywhere, yet within everything, and our place in that, which will cause us to hopefully feel that sense of respect and reverence to God being there, and watching. Actually, that's a big part of it, and will motivate us to action. So it's like this. It's that acceptance of God. It's that acceptance of our role that fuels action. So the Alter Rebbe says, how do we do this? And we're going to come back to what that even means through this conversation of how do we do this. So it's not easy. This chapter is all about the word yegia. That's the top of the next page. Yegia means toil. You would think, and we're toiling to uncover something that's within us. In other words, it's the nature of every Jew to fear God and love God. Both of those things are in our nature. It's the second to last page at the top. So you would think it is in our nature. Every single Jewish soul is born with this ability, this natural. We talk a lot about the natural love. We've talked a lot about that in previous chapters. But we also have a natural fear. We do have these qualities in us that really just need to be unearthed. And that's later in the chapter. Yet, it's not easy because we don't live in bodiless soul existences. We live in bodies, we live on earth, and we don't necessarily have access to that conviction and sight as would be that would make it easy for us. Sometimes we get a glimpse. Sometimes almost like a lightning, if you're walking on a dark path and you're trying to find the path and it's not easy, and all of a sudden there's like lightning in the distance and it lights up your path for a split second, and you're given like, oh, there, I see everything. I see the path, I see where it is, but it's fleeting. Sometimes we get a glimpse of clarity of where it all comes from and where we're all going and what's my role. And some people find that with psychedelic experiences, and some people do get enlightening experiences and moments of clarity. Yet, those are not long-lasting. Those are not day-to-day. Day-to-day is about toil. It's about putting a lot of effort into the zoning in or zooming in on this truth. So firstly, it tells us in the chapter, it says, first of all, we have to have yigiat basar. We have to have the toil of the flesh. It's kind of exertion of the flesh. So we actually learned about this in chapter 29 a little bit, breaking our ego. Yeah. So the exertion of the flesh is a review for us, because in chapter 29, we learned about how part of being alive is having an ego. And sometimes in order to be able to be sensitive to our godly soul, we need to temper our ego. But actually, there is a very harsh way of physical deprivation that's really not the leading way to do it. The leading way of putting our ego in perspective and is with teshuvah, actually. And that's what it says right here. Al yedei hirhure teshuvah. Through this being accomplished, I'm at the end of the second paragraph. This being accomplished by means of penitential reflections from the depths of the heart, as is explained there.
Sorry, where are you?
I'm at the second paragraph on the same page. I'll start from the beginning of the paragraph. As has been mentioned above, in the name of the Zohar, that a body into which the light of the soul does not penetrate should be crushed. This being accomplished by means of penitential reflections from the depths of the heart, as explained there. So, how do we put we talked about how we have this innate fear, but we live in a body, we live in an ego. We don't live with an everlasting flash of lightning clarity. Maybe we will get that once in a while. But on a daily basis, we are ego. We do possess ego, and that's what's how we were designed, and it's how we live, and it's how we sustain. How can we put that in its place so that we can be sensitive to our soul? And the way the Alter Rebbe says to do that is very appropriate for this time of pre-Rosh Hashanah, Teshuvah, is when we really try to connect to our soul and our heart. And it's painful for it. Sometimes the truth of our actions hurt, and that's why it can work to mitigate the ego through that painful process of, ow, ooh. And that teshuvah can put the ego in its place, and then lead us to the next step, which is yigiat nefesh, the third main paragraph. And the second is the exertion of the soul to reveal. So once we've got the ego in its place, we can now work on the soul. To reveal the powers of the soul, that the service of exerting one's thought not be burdensome to it, to delve into and reflect upon the greatness of God for a long and uninterrupted period. So the toil, the exertion, is that concentration that we would have to really put effort into, to really, really connect to a meditation and take it far. Depending on different people, that's how long everybody's created different. Some will need longer, some will need shorter, but it definitely will be a toil for every human because we're human. And what are we meditating on? I keep losing it. I keep getting into losing it, but maybe that's why it's toil, right? Like these are concepts that are maybe so true, but to really make them real, we have to really concentrate. And the word is concentrate. Sometimes, like, it's really, I think it's even harder for people with ADHD, right? Like, that's what they have a hard time doing is concentrating and having da'at. It's very, very difficult for some more than others. But even for some who don't have any impediment to concentration, it's still hard to concentrate on abstract concepts that are counter reality of what's right in front of us. So what can help is meditating on the something we mentioned already in the last week's chapter 41, which is what Yochanan ben Zakkai said, that even if we were just to just imagine God being a person in the room watching us, that would already make us feel a little bit of inhibition. Inhibition is on the fear side, right? We're going to be limiting ourselves if we feel inhibited. We're going to be contracting. We're going to be making space for whatever it is that we feel we must in the presence of another. That's a very physical starting point. But you know what the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said? He said, let that be a starting point. That's already good. If you can just imagine a presence watching and seeing. And the Tanya continues to talk about in this chapter how true is it? And this can be continuing our meditation. And actually we can even meditate it on right now. We can close our eyes, and I didn't write this, so we'll just do it live. We can close our eyes. I like to ground feet, and for me that's important. And we can take deep breaths in and out. And settle into our minds. And let's begin with the way it feels when we're alone. And we're never alone. Hashem is always with us. But when we feel to be by ourselves, and how that feels inside of our body. Maybe we feel a sense of freedom, expansiveness. We can take up space. We can sing loud. And to when someone comes into the room, and pay attention to what that does to the sensations in your body. Do you feel yourself bringing in your energy to take up less space? Do you feel watched? Do you feel more comfortable, less comfortable? Focusing less on who that person is and more on being in the presence of watchful eyes. Imagine these watchful eyes can see your appearance, can see how you move about your space. Now, imagine these watchful eyes able to see through you. What's in your heart? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are the sensations inside of your body that you feel? And this presence can hear the whoosh of your blood, heartbeat. It can also hear that is inside of you that hasn't even been visible. Maybe a sensation of thought before you've had a chance to flesh out what it is. Maybe it's a sensation that you're not sure and you haven't had a chance to process. It can see that, it can feel that, it can hear that. Imagine that this presence is not just in your house, that it comes with you where you are. It is. Feel the sense of presence in your life. A constant, everlasting presence. Always aware of the you that you show and the you that you keep private. This presence is there too. And this presence knows what's best for you and what you need to do, what you haven't done, what you should be doing, what you know you should be doing. It sees your path. It sees your future. It sees your past. There is nothing hidden to this presence. Tune into your sensations. What is coming up for you? Allow yourself to sit with that question. And I'm going to give us a few moments of quiet breath to see where it takes you. feel free to open your eyes when you're ready. I'm really curious to hear what came up for you.
So for me, at first I felt very protected. I was very happy to feel the presence. And then when you started saying this, this presence sees everything, the past, the future, I felt as if, I was naked. I felt like the nudity, and then came the negative of this nudity. So the shame of being, nude, naked, the guilt of whatever was negative, because I could feel like a judgment.
I felt it. Very scary almost.
Yeah.
That
You can't escape.
Yeah.
sees everything in through you.
That was the visualization, is like you can't go anywhere where this presence is not, right?
I had to fight very hard the concept of it being judgmental. That seeing it could see everything.
Yeah.
Now, as a psychology thought, you would think, okay, that's from parenting and, inherited generational judgment. It was hard, very painful for me to feel it was benevolent, and I almost wanted to cry, thinking it's here for my best purposes. Did you feel that?
I also had tears come up. How about you? Yeah.
Well, firstly, I also felt very peaceful. And then I started focusing on family issues, which caused me a bit of concept.
Interesting that created a space for these feelings to come up within you. Yes. What's interesting is this is a fear meditation. And we talk about fear being, it's not as fun as love. But it can be overlooked or neglected because of that. But there are so many things, there's so many aspects that are all part of the fear side, right? We talked about the respect. We talked about shame is on the fear side. This shame is very interesting that you felt that, because Yirat Boshet is a type of fear, we will even learn about it, of this shame that we are, in a sense, nude before God. He does see us in every capacity. And what that creates is a sense of, whether it's awe or shame or inhibition or fear or respect or something that is contractive, right? Something that makes us feel obligation, right? Something that makes us feel
I should be doing more.
Maybe I should be doing more. And maybe there's judgment, and the truth is Rosh Hashanah is coming, right? We talk about the God of judgment. Don't forget that God is both, though. So, and there's two ways that there's two thoughts that I'd like to share that might help us put it into context, not to take it away or to whitewash, because it's really there, but context. So first of all, I would say that the difference between constructive shame, because we're going to learn about shame, and negative shame, which we learned about in the past chapter of Tanya, that the Tanya said isn't helpful. So would be identifying our identity with something negative. So if we say I when we feel naked and we feel the shame of being seen in everything that we've done, positive or negative, mistakes we've made, parts of our feelings that we don't feel proud of, or whatever that is, and we know that that's not who we are. Who we are at our essence is the soul of God. When we don't identify as this part of me is the core of me, then the shame hopefully brings about a sense of, it's like a package deal kind of shame. Like when you're seen, like there are places, there is space for nakedness, to come in relationships, right? To come to somebody vulnerable, to come to somebody bare, without coverings and without costume or masking. We're coming with who we are, good, bad, and ugly, right? That's how we really connect. That part of shame, that part of nudity or whatever, has a place. But are we going to hyper-focus on the negative aspects and say, that's who I am? That part of shame that Tanya says isn't helpful, because it's not based on truth. It is not who we are. As in the point of who we are. Like, if we can't be distilled to that, right? So that would be one aspect of one thought I'd like to share. Another thought I'd like to share is that Hashem we have the love too. So right now we're doing a fear meditation, but it's not the whole story. And last week we learned in chapter 41 that God is a father and a king, right? He's a king and he's a father. He's both. And on Rosh Hashanah, we're really big into remembering both aspects, because it is the day of judgment. But if the judgment was from an entity, if this presence had a vindicative agenda, then it would feel less balanced and more scary. But if the presence has judgment, however, also has compassion and mercy and loving understanding of who we are, then it has its place. It's an aspect. It's a truth. And not all truth is fun for us. It's not as enjoyable as other truths. So I hope that can bring some context into what the fear of, and this lower level of fear of God is this zoning in and connecting this da'at, right? Because we're using the word da'at because we may know it, but we're trying to know it. We're trying to be intimately aware of this presence in our lives that will motivate us to align with our purpose in a way of, I'm not just irrelevant and just can do whatever and it won't be seen and won't be heard. Actually, it will. I am always seen. I am always in Hashem's presence. And the Tanya recognizes that it's a toil to come to that awareness, that active awareness that is Da'at. And it's, wow, Rosh Hashanah is like a really good time to really connect to this.
Is this coincidence that we just happened to break and come into it?
Absolutely, yes.
Amazing.
It is. And the beauty of it is that Beryl was sharing with me last night the Hasidic discourse he was learning, and it actually, he said it's so cool because it was referencing chapter 41 and 42 and 43 also, which move us into the higher level of fear, which is more connected to Rosh Hashanah itself. So I'm looking forward to learning about that, and follow us in the recording. So 42 is about this month of Elul, which is a preparatory thing for Rosh Hashanah, right? We're getting ready for the Judgment Day, and it's about our work, right? It's about doing the toil. And then when the higher level of fear comes, we'll see how that does also align with Rosh Hashanah itself. And then we've got love coming after that, and we've learned about before the progression of the holidays, and I love experiencing that and learning and tuning into that differently every year.
I know time's run very short here, but I was wondering, talking last week, you'd said that this was all part of the agenda for the upcoming holidays, and I talked to John about how incredible that was, and I was wondering if there was any way you and Rabbi could co-host how the agenda for the holidays, what it really means in these
do like
terms.
A class, like about,
yes,
oh my God, that would be
woman,
so
one
cool.
night.
I
Even
love that
just
idea.
to say how this
I'm just going to close the
marries
recording.